What if the story we've all been told was only part of the truth? Because when you really stop and look at Sister Wives, something doesn't quite add up. And the deeper you go into Robyn Brown's past, the more it starts to feel like there were pieces missing all along. At first, everything seemed simple. A mother trying to protect her children. A woman opening up about her fears, her worries, the possibility that one day her kids might choose a different path. And in that moment, it felt real, raw, relatable. Because any parent understands that quiet fear, the idea that no matter how much love you give, your children could still drift away. She spoke about identity, about belonging, about how children grow older and start asking questions that don't have easy answers. Questions about where they truly fit. And for a moment, it felt like we were watching something deeply personal unfold. But then, everything changed. Because what started as a fear of losing her children somehow turned into a decision that would change their lives forever. The conversation didn't stay in that emotional space. It shifted, slowly, but undeniably, towards something permanent. Something final. The idea that their biological father, David Jessup, would step away completely, and that Cody Brown would legally take his place. And that's where people started asking questions. Not small questions, big ones. Because how does a story move from fear to finality like that? Some believe it was all about stability. About creating one solid foundation in a complicated family dynamic. And maybe that's true. Maybe it really was about giving those children a sense of security in a world that was anything but traditional. But others aren't so sure, because when they look back now, they don't just see emotion. They see a build-up. A quiet lead-up to something much bigger. Almost like the story we were watching was guiding us somewhere. Preparing everyone, both inside the family and outside, for a decision that had already begun taking shape. And the truth is, we'll probably never know what was said behind closed doors. But what we do know is that something about it stayed with people, because even years later, this isn't a story that faded away. If anything, it only grew louder. Part of that is because of the silence. Because after everything happened, one name seemed to almost disappear. David Jessup was no longer part of the conversation. No updates. No clear answers. Just absence. And sometimes, silence raises more questions than anything else. People started wondering what really happened after the cameras stopped rolling. What the relationship looked like behind the scenes. Whether there were moments, conversations, emotions, that the audience was never meant to see, because reality TV only shows you what fits the story. And when fans went back, re-watching old episodes, they started noticing things they hadn't seen before. Small reactions. Subtle comments. Moments that once felt ordinary, now carried weight. Almost like hidden pieces of a much larger puzzle. And that's when the narrative began to shift again, because what was once presented as a joyful step forward started to feel more complicated. More layered. More human. Because adoption isn't just a legal process. It's not just paperwork. It's identity. It's connection. It's a complete redefinition of what family means, especially for children still trying to understand where they belong. And that's why the story never really lets people go. Some still believe it was the right decision. That it brought stability, unity, and a stronger sense of belonging. But others continue to question if there was more beneath the surface. Not necessarily something hidden, but something deeper. Motivations that were never fully explained. Pressures that were never fully seen. And then, just when things seemed to settle, another layer of mystery appeared. Online discussions began circulating. Stories about a fundraiser connected to David Jessup's health. Some people responded with empathy. Others hesitated, questioning what was real and what wasn't. Because in today's world, information spreads fast. And not all of it is clear. The conversation split. Some urged compassion. Others demanded proof. And once again, attention returned to a part of the story that had been quiet for far too long. But here's the reality. When information is limited, speculation fills the gaps. And behind every theory, every debate, there are real people. Real lives. Real consequences that go far beyond what we see on a screen. Still, the reason this story refuses to disappear is simple. It taps into something universal. The need to understand family. Identity. Belonging. For the children, that decision marked the beginning of a new chapter. But for the audience, it became something else entirely. A turning point. A moment that changed how everything was seen. And even now, after all this time, the same question keeps coming back, not louder, but deeper. What really happened when the cameras weren't there? Because the more you look at this story, the more layers you find. And maybe that's the real reason people can't look away. Because sometimes, the most powerful truths are the ones we were never fully shown. What if everything you thought you understood wasn't actually the full picture? Because when you take a closer look at Sister Wives, there's a feeling you can't quite ignore. A sense that something important may have been left unsaid. And at the center of it all is Robyn Brown, a story that, over time, has started to feel more layered than it first appeared. At the beginning, it seemed simple, honest, even. A mother speaking openly about her fears. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just real emotion. The kind that instantly connects, especially when it comes to children. She talked about something deeply personal, the idea that as children grow older, they start to question everything. Where they belong, who they are, what home truly means. And in that moment, it didn't feel like reality TV anymore. It felt like real life unfolding in front of us. There was a quiet fear in her words. The possibility that one day, her children might choose a different path. That they could decide to leave, to reconnect more deeply with their biological father, David Jessup, and build a life away from everything she had created. And that fear, it felt understandable, because in a family dynamic as complex as this one, multiple relationships, multiple households, shifting roles, it's not hard to imagine how a child could feel torn between two worlds. For a moment, viewers saw vulnerability. A mother trying to hold everything together, knowing how fragile it all could be. But then, something shifted. Slowly, almost quietly, the direction of the conversation began to change. It wasn't just about fear anymore. It wasn't just about what might happen in the future. It started to become about control over that future. Because instead of focusing on keeping that connection open, the idea emerged that would change everything. The possibility that Cody Brown would step in, not just emotionally, but legally. That he would adopt the children. That their biological father would no longer hold that role in the same way. And just like that, the story moved from uncertainty to permanence. And that's where people began to pause, because that kind of decision doesn't just happen overnight. It's not something that appears out of nowhere. It requires conversations, agreements, moments that carry weight far beyond what we ever saw on screen. So the question naturally followed, how did it get there? How did a story that started with fear end with a complete transformation of family identity? Some people believe the answer is simple. That it was about stability, about creating one unified structure in a situation that was anything but traditional. A way to give the children consistency in a world that could easily feel divided. And maybe that's true. But others see something different when they look back. They notice the pacing, the way emotions were expressed, the way certain conversations seemed to build towards something, as if the audience was being guided, step by step, toward accepting a decision before it was even fully revealed. Not forced, not obvious, just gradual. And that's what makes it so fascinating, because when a story unfolds that way, it leaves behind questions, not accusations. Just questions, questions about timing, questions about intention, questions about what we didn't see. And even now, years later, those questions haven't gone away. If anything, they've only become stronger. And as time went on, the silence became just as powerful as anything that had been said before. Because after such a life-changing decision, you would expect clarity, updates, some kind of understanding of how everything settled into place. But instead, one part of the story seemed to fade almost completely out of view. The presence of David Jessup became quieter and quieter until it felt like he had disappeared from the narrative altogether. And that's when curiosity turned into something deeper. Because when someone who once played such a central role is suddenly no longer part of the conversation, it doesn't close the story, it opens it. People started asking what really happened after everything changed. What did life look like behind the scenes? How did the children process such a major shift? Not just legally, but emotionally. Because no matter how something is presented on screen, real life doesn't just wrap itself up in a neat ending. And that's where viewers began to look back. Old episodes, moments that once felt small, started to carry a different kind of weight. A glance, a pause, a reaction that didn't seem important at the time, now felt like it meant something more, almost like pieces of a puzzle that only make sense once you know where to look. And the more people revisited Sister Wives, the more that feeling grew, that there was a deeper story running quietly beneath everything we were shown, because what was presented as a joyful step forward didn't feel so simple anymore. Not because anyone could prove something was wrong, but because big decisions like that are never just one thing. Adoption isn't just a legal change. It's not just a signature on paper. It reshapes identity. It redefines relationships. It changes how children understand their past and their future. And that's why this story stayed with people. Some viewers continue to believe it was the right choice, that it created stability, that it brought everyone closer together in a way that made sense for that family, but others can't ignore the feeling that there may have been more beneath the surface. Not necessarily something hidden, but something unspoken, motivations that were never fully explained, emotions that didn't make it onto the screen, conversations that happened when the cameras were no longer there, and then, just when the discussion started to quiet down, something unexpected brought it all back again. Online conversations began to spread. Mentions of a fundraiser connected to David Jessupp's health. And almost instantly, the reactions were divided. Some people responded with sympathy, seeing it as a reminder that behind every storyline are real lives facing real challenges. Others hesitated. They questioned the details, wondered whether everything being shared had been properly confirmed, because in a world where information travels fast, not everything comes with clear answers. And once again, the story found itself surrounded by uncertainty. Discussions grew. Debates formed. And attention returned to a part of the narrative that had once gone quiet. And maybe the most unsettling part of all isn't what we saw, it's what we didn't. Because when a story leaves behind this many unanswered questions, it doesn't just fade away. It lingers, quietly, in the background, waiting for someone to look a little closer, to ask one more question, to notice one more detail that didn't quite make sense the first time around. And that's exactly what keeps happening with Sister Wives. People keep going back, not because they're looking for drama, but because they're trying to understand something that never fully settled. Something that felt complete on the surface, but unfinished underneath. Because when you really think about it, decisions like this don't just affect one moment in time. They echo through relationships, through identity, through the way people see themselves years later. And that's what makes this story feel so different, because for Robyn Brown, it may have been about protecting her children, about creating a stable environment, about making a choice she believed was right in that moment. But for the audience, it became something much bigger, a turning point, a moment where perception shifted. Because once that decision was made, everything else started to look different too. Past conversations felt heavier. Old scenes carried new meaning. Even the smallest details began to stand out in ways they never had before. And that's when people started asking themselves something deeper. Not just what happened, but why it happened the way it did. Because sometimes, it's not the decision itself that stays with people. It's the path that led there, the timing, the emotions, the way everything unfolded, piece by piece, until there was no going back. And even now, there's a sense that parts of that journey remain untold. Not necessarily hidden, but never fully explored. Because reality television has a way of simplifying things, of turning complex, emotional situations into clear storylines with beginnings, middles, and endings. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life is messy, complicated, full of moments that don't fit neatly into a single narrative. And maybe that's why this story continues to stay alive, because it reminds people of that difference, the difference between what we're shown and what actually exists beyond the screen. And as long as that gap remains, so will the questions about identity, about connection, about the kind of choices that reshape lives in ways no one else can fully see. And maybe there isn't a simple answer. Maybe the truth isn't something shocking or hidden, but something layered, something human. Still, that doesn't stop people from wondering, because curiosity doesn't disappear when a story ends. If anything, it grows stronger. And that's why, even now, viewers of Sister Wives keep coming back, rewatching, rethinking, re-questioning, trying to piece together a story that feels just out of reach. And in the end, maybe that's the real reason this moment never fades. Not because of what was confirmed, but because of what never was. Because sometimes, the most powerful part of any story is the part that's left untold. And the longer people sit with this story, the more it starts to feel like something that never fully closed, because even though years have passed, the questions never really disappeared. They just shifted, changed shape, resurfaced in different ways. And every time viewers revisit Sister Wives, they seem to walk away with something new. A detail they missed. A moment that feels different now. A line that lands heavier than it did the first time. Almost like the story keeps unfolding, even long after the camera stopped rolling. For some people, the entire situation is simply a reminder of how complicated blended families can be. That role life decisions, especially ones involving children, are rarely black and white. And that even the most well-intentioned choices can carry consequences no one fully anticipates at the time. But for others, the feeling is different. They can't shake the sense that the full picture was never truly shown, not in a dramatic, secretive way, but in the quiet, human way where certain emotions, conversations, and motivations never make it onto a screen. And that's the part that keeps this story alive. Because at the center of everything are real people, real relationships, real consequences. For Robyn Brown, this chapter represented a deeply personal choice, one that reshaped her family's future in ways only those directly involved could fully understand. For Cody Brown, it marked a turning point in how the family structure evolved, changing dynamics, responsibilities, and relationships forever. And for the children, it was something even more profound. Because decisions made in childhood don't just shape the present. They echo into adulthood. They shape identity, belonging, and the way a person sees their place in the world. And maybe that's why viewers can't let this story go, because underneath all the speculation and debate, there's something deeply human about it. Something that goes beyond television. Beyond opinions. Beyond drama. It taps into something universal. The need to belong, the search for identity, the desire to feel secure in the place you call home. And even though time has passed, the story still doesn't feel fully settled. Not because of conflict, but because of unanswered questions. Questions about timing, questions about decisions, questions about how much of a story we truly saw, and maybe those questions will never have clear answers. Because some parts of life aren't documented. They aren't filmed. They aren't explained. They just happen. But that doesn't stop people from wondering. It doesn't stop them from looking back, rewatching, reconsidering, trying to understand something that feels bigger than what was shown. And maybe that's the most powerful part of all, because long after the episodes aired, long after the storyline moved forward, one feeling still remains. A quiet curiosity. A sense that the story isn't just about what happened, but about what might still remain untold. And maybe that's the real reason this chapter never truly ended. Because some stories don't fade with time, they stay, not because of what we know, but because of what we still don't. And even now, there's a feeling that the story is still unfolding. Not in front of the cameras, but somewhere beyond them, because the truth is, stories like this don't end when an episode fades out. They continue in real lives, in quiet moments, in conversations we were never meant to hear. And that's exactly why this chapter connected so deeply with viewers of Sister Wives. It didn't feel like just another storyline. It felt personal. Because when people look back at everything surrounding Robyn Brown, Cody Brown, and David Jessup, they're not just watching events unfold, they're trying to understand them. Trying to make sense of decisions that carry weight far beyond what can be explained in a single moment or a single episode. And maybe that's where the real impact lies. Because over time, this story stopped being about one decision. It became about perspective. The way people interpret what they see, the way emotions shape understanding, the way unanswered questions leave space for multiple truths to exist at once. Some viewers still hold on to the belief that everything happened for the right reasons. That it was about protection, about stability, about building something stronger out of something uncertain. And that perspective is valid. But at the same time, there are those who continue to feel that something about the journey doesn't fully align. Not in a way that points to wrongdoing, but in a way that feels incomplete, like a chapter missing a few final pages. And that tension between what's known and what's felt is what keeps this conversation alive. Because the human mind naturally searches for closure. It wants clear answers, clear motives, clear outcomes, but real life doesn't always provide that. Sometimes, the truth exists in layers. In emotions, in perspectives that don't always match. And maybe that's exactly what happened here. Maybe there isn't one single explanation that ties everything together. Maybe there are moments we'll never fully understand, conversations we'll never hear, decisions we'll never see from every angle. And yet, despite all of that, people keep coming back. Not just to revisit the story, but to revisit how it made them feel. Because that's what powerful storytelling does. It stays with you. It makes you question. It makes you reflect. It makes you see things differently the second time around, and even the third. And in the case of Sister Wives, this particular chapter has done exactly that. It turned a moment into a mystery. A decision into a debate. A storyline into something that still lives on long after it should have faded. And maybe that's the final piece of it all. Not a shocking reveal, not a hidden answer, but a realization that sometimes the reason a story stays with us isn't because we know everything about it. It's because we don't. Because in that space of not knowing, curiosity grows stronger, questions become deeper, and the story never truly ends. So even now, as time moves forward and new chapters continue to unfold, one thing remains unchanged. That quiet question in the back of everyone's mind: what really happened when no one was watching? And maybe that's a question that will never have a complete answer, but perhaps that's exactly what keeps the story alive.